Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to cut through some of the noise. We're looking at a really crucial government document, the Ontario Fall Economic Statement. This one dropped November 6th, 2025.
Right. And we're pairing that with analysis from Phoenix Q International News from the same time.
Exactly. Because we're not just looking at provincial finances, in a bubble. Our mission here is pretty specific. We want to use this statement, kind of like a high-definition snapshot, really, to see exactly how these immediate escalating global trade fights, how they're actually hitting home.
Yeah, how they translate into, well, painful local realities,
Yeah.
jobs, provincial finances.
In Ontario, Canada's biggest provincial economy. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's follow the money.
And you're absolutely right to connect the global to the local straight away. I mean, the government itself sets that tone. Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy, he basically defined the whole situation as one of deepening uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pretty quick to point fingers, wasn't he? Said it was external trade pressures we did not create.
Right. And that phrase, it's not just talk, is it? It really frames everything that follows in the statement. Every decision, every policy.
Every dollar spent, it sets the precedent.
Okay, so let's get into the numbers that follow that statement, because honestly, some of them are genuinely alarming. We have to start with the tangible hit, what the sources are calling the tariff toll.
Mm-hmm.
The direct result of these U.S. trade tariffs, and we'll get into the specifics of those later, is, well, a clear slowdown in job creation, it's weakening growth overall, and unemployment's ticking up.
And to really get how serious this is, you got to compare the projections. Remember back in the May budget?
Yeah, things look better then.
They did. The province was forecasting pretty strong job creation for this year, something like 73,000 new jobs.
Okay.
Well, this false statement, it revises that down to 70,000.
Okay, a drop, but maybe not catastrophic yet.
Wait for it. That's bad, sure. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting, or maybe worrying is the better word. The projection for next year, it just craters. Drops way down to only 35,000 new jobs expected.
35,000, wow, that's not just slowing down, that's like hitting the brakes hard on hiring confidence.
It really is.
Does the source material give any hints about why that forward look is so pessimistic? Are they thinking recession, or just that this trade fight is dragging on?
Well, the insight here seems to suggest it's more systemic damage, not just a short-term blip. The long-term view took the biggest hit, precisely because tariffs, they don't just mess with current sales. They sort of poison the well for future investment, capital investment.
Right. Companies just stop planning.
Exactly. They halt expansions, they delay new projects, they freeze hiring if they can't reliably figure out if they can even sell into their biggest market, the U.S.
Makes sense.
And that's why the province now expects about 1,000 fewer jobs overall across the next 4 years. And the biggest cuts, they're anticipating those hitting specifically by 2027. It's a longer shadow.
That sustained pain. You can really feel it in the current unemployment numbers too, can't you? We're talking about real hardship here. It's not just stats on a page.
We certainly are. The current unemployment rate, it's jumped up significantly. It's at 7.8%.
Mm-hmm.
And the projections, they show it staying above where they thought it would be right through 2028.
So no quick recovery expected.
Doesn't look like it. And the human cost, that's critical. The government's own data, cited right there in the statement, confirms it. More than 700,000 Ontarians are already jobless.
700,000 people out of work. And that number, it looks even starker when you put it next to the national picture, right?
Absolutely. Statistics Canada data from September, the statement, refers to this. It showed Ontario's jobless rate actually hit 7.9% back then, which was substantially higher than the national rate of 7.1%. So Ontario is demonstrably struggling more than the rest of Canada. It just highlights how targeted these trade measures have been and how effective, unfortunately.
So where's the pain concentrated? Which sectors are really bearing the brunt? The ministry was pretty clear on this.
Yeah, they were.
Pointing directly to the industries hit hardest by U.S. tariffs. We're talking manufacturing, the big one, the auto sector,
Foundational.
and steel. These are backbone industries for so many communities across the province. Think about places like Windsor or Hamilton.
Yeah, the impact there must be intense.
So the pain is focused, it's severe. Which brings us straight to the government's biggest headache. They've promised strong action, right?
Declared they're ready to do whatever it takes to protect workers and jobs. Strong words.
Very strong words. But what's the price tag? What's the actual fiscal cost attached to that kind of pledge? Because whatever it takes usually costs a lot.
That price tag.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it's probably the single most shocking number in the whole document. In response to this tariff crisis and the need to shield those sectors we just mentioned, the government announced it's prepared to commit up to $30 billion in tariff-related support.
30 billion with a B.
With a B. $30 billion. That is just an enormous amount of money to allocate essentially to fight an economic war that, as they say, they didn't start.
But hang on, 30 billion. How can a province that's been so focused on, balancing its budget possibly afford to even earmark that kind of money, even if they don't spend it all right away?
Well, exactly.
Doesn't just putting that number out there immediately throw their whole fiscal plan, that 2027-28 target, right off the rails?
That is the core conflict in this fall economic statement. You've nailed it. It just lays bare that tension between fighting the fire right in front of you and sticking to your long-term fiscal discipline plan.
So how do they square that circle?
Well, they note that overall revenue did actually rise by $3.2 billion, mostly thanks to stronger than expected tax returns and some gains in the public sector. So there's some good news.
Okay, a little bit of cushion.
A little bit. But the problem is, this external trade war, it's now like an existential threat to that long-term goal of balancing the budget. Real GDP growth forecasts are, well, they're frighteningly low. Just 0.8% this year and only 0.9% next year.
Almost flatlining.
Pretty much. And the statement itself includes this explicit warning. The risk of things slowing down even more could completely derail their plan to get back to balance by 2027-28.
Wow.
So that $30 billion commitment, it feels both essential for survival right now and potentially fatal to their biggest fiscal promise.
It really is the ultimate high-stakes gamble then. Okay, so facing all that uncertainty, needing to show they're doing something tangible for the public, the government announced a pretty specific, high-profile policy. Let's talk about the tax rebate.
Yeah, the one for first-time homebuyers.
Right. Tell us about that.
Okay, so specifically, Ontario announced it will rebate its share of the HST, that's the harmonized sales tax for people buying their very first home. It's a smart political move, Housing costs are such a huge source of public anxiety.
Absolutely. And the potential savings for, for you, the person trying to buy that first house, they sound pretty significant.
They could be. The statement suggests that when you combine this provincial rebate with federal relief measures that were already there, well, it could save buyers up to $80,000.
$80,000? That's huge.
It could potentially wipe out the entire 13% sales tax burden on a property, depending on the price and location, of course.
That's a powerful message to send when people are feeling squeezed.
It really is. It's an immediate, measurable action the public can see and feel. It's a political antidote to all the recession talk.
But it's not free. What's the cost to the province?
No, definitely not free. The program is budgeted to cost about $470 million over 3 years.
Okay.
So again, it just illustrates that every single policy decision right now, it's expensive. And it seems driven by this overwhelming need to demonstrate action while the economy is basically stalling out.
Okay, this feels like a good point to step back. We need to connect this local economic pain, the job numbers, the spending, back to its roots. We keep saying trade pressures. What does the source material actually tell us about the specific geopolitical climate, back in November 2025 that created all this mess?
Right, let's connect this to the bigger picture. The context, reading between the lines of the sources, it's clearly defined by, well, escalated trade wars, mostly initiated by the U.S. administration at the time. The sources actually confirm the specific nature of the U.S.-Canada tension. There's one headline: Trump-Canada trade dispute escalates over Reagan ad.
Over a Reagan ad? Seriously?
Apparently. It shows how specific, how targeted, and frankly, how politicized this conflict had become. It wasn't just about, dumping steel anymore. It seemed to be wrapped up in political and maybe even cultural grievances.
And it wasn't just Canada in the crosshairs, right? The sources make it clear this was a much broader trade offensive from the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. It was a full-spectrum trade war, seems like. Trump's administration was threatening a 100% tax in what the sources were calling the China tariff war response.
100% tax on Chinese goods.
That was the threat, yeah. And what I found fascinating, maybe a bit bizarre, was how it extended even to culture.
Culture?
Yeah, one headline specifically mentioned movie tariff on imports. Trump pushes 100% duty on foreign films.
100% tariff on foreign movies, right?
I mean, when an administration starts slapping 100% tariffs on imported films, the goal isn't just like economic adjustment. It feels more like using tariffs as a political weapon, aiming for disruption on a global scale.
Okay, so facing this intense external pressure, this kind of broad aggression, how is Canada's federal government responding? What was Prime Minister Mark Carney doing? What counter strategies pop up in the sources?
Well, Carney's strategy looks like classic geopolitical maneuvering under pressure, sort of a
Okay.
two-pronged approach.
Right.
Domestically, he's expanding the Buy Canadian strategy, trying to broaden it to all sectors, build up the internal market, make it more resilient.
Makes sense. Shore up the home front.
Exactly. And then externally, he's clearly signaling a pivot, trying to look beyond the U.S. trade relationship, or at least hedge his bets. The sources say he ordered a Canada-Indo-Pacific strategy update just as he was heading off to Asia. It screams desperation, really. Looking for new, maybe less volatile global partners to try and offset the damage the U.S. tariffs were doing.
It sounds like a really unstable time. And all this economic strain, it must have translated directly into political instability back home, too.
Oh, definitely.
We can't just gloss over that detail that this fall economic statement, this big document we're dissecting, it was delivered while Prime Minister Mark Carney was actually facing his first confidence vote.
Yeah, timing is everything.
For listeners who maybe don't follow federal politics that closely, what's the significance of a confidence vote happening right then in that specific context?
Well, a confidence vote, it basically signifies a crisis point for the government.
Mm-hmm.
It means the party in power, Carney's government, was facing a real risk of losing the confidence of the House of Commons.
Meaning they could fall. An election.
Exactly, being forced into an election.
Sure.
So picture this. You're delivering a major economic statement. You're committing potentially $30 billion to fight a foreign trade war. Your economy's sputtering. And at the same time, you're fighting for your political survival in Parliament.
Wow.
It just shows how profoundly that economic situation had destabilized the entire political landscape.
Yeah.
You had the province spending massive amounts and the federal government seemingly hanging on by a thread.
Okay, this brings us to what might be the most surprising element in this whole document. We've gone through the job cuts, the huge $30 billion support pledge, the low GDP, the HST rebate for homebuyers.
All the economic stuff.
Right. But the statement didn't actually stop there, did it? It seems it took a sharp turn into purely political territory.
That's the part that really jumps out and probably needs the most critical look. Because, yeah, tucked away in there amidst all the economic doom and gloom and relief measures, the fall economic statement proposed some major reforms to election law, changes that could fundamentally reshape democracy in the province.
Okay, tell us about those. What exactly did the government slip in there while everyone was understandably focused on economic survival?
Well, the sources lay out three big political proposals. First one, abolish fixed election dates.
Get rid of scheduled elections.
Yeah, give the government control over timing again. Second, extend the government's term length from the standard 4 years up to 5 years.
A longer term in office?
And third, lift the spending limits on third-party groups during election campaigns. You know, those outside organizations that advertise.
Wow. Okay, that is huge. Taken together, that's way beyond just an economic update. Abolishing fixed dates, extending the term. That gives the party in power massive strategic advantages, doesn't it? They get to pick the election timing.
Precisely. Huge advantage. And lifting spending limits on third-party groups. Well, that adds this enormous kind of unregulated financial element into campaigns. Critics would definitely argue that benefits powerful, well-funded organizations who happen to support the government.
So these are pretty radical political changes, and they're being proposed right at the moment the province is arguing it's facing this unprecedented economic emergency.
That's the timing. It's notable, let's say.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this then. We've seen the quantitative damage from the tariffs. 700,000 Ontarians jobless, projections down to only 35,000 new jobs next year, the pain hitting auto and steel hard.
Right, which forced this massive high-cost fiscal response up to $30 billion potentially, which in turn has put the province's long-term budget goals in serious jeopardy.
And this whole economic crisis is tied directly, inextricably to that wider geopolitical trade war we talked about. The U.S. actions, the global instability.
And it seems that desperation, the need to look strong, project control, maintain stability amidst all the external chaos and the internal political pressure, like that confidence vote, that seems to have become the justification, maybe the cover, for making these really fundamental changes to the actual rules of democracy. The sources seem to link the economic crisis and these political moves pretty seamlessly.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought, something for you, the listener, to carry forward from this deep dive. We've seen Ontario, under the intense pressure of a trade war, doing two big things at once, committing enormous sums of public money to fight the economic battle.
while also proposing sweeping changes to its own election laws.
So the question becomes, how might the necessity or the perceived necessity of fighting a trade war, of protecting jobs in this really tough, uncertain fiscal climate, how might that become the justification, the political cover for making decisions that fundamentally alter democratic norms?
Yeah, does economic crisis, whether it's totally real or maybe partly manufactured, give governments the license they need for radical political reforms that maybe wouldn't fly in normal times?
It's definitely something to think about, especially as you watch how governments, maybe around the world, react to the kind of financial and political pressures that come with these escalating trade conflicts.